I want you to imagine a single country that is quite literally living in two totally different centuries at the exact same time.
Oh, yeah. It's a wild concept.
Right. Because if you look at one part of it, you see this like booming, high-tech, hyper-connected economy, basically California.
Exactly.
But then, you turn your head just a little bit and you're looking at these levels of severe deprivation, lack of basic health care, infant mortality rates that, they basically resemble the poorest nations in sub-Saharan Africa.
Yeah. It's a staggering paradox, really.
And the catch is, this isn't two different countries, it's one single nation.
And honestly, it's probably one of the most important economic and social puzzles of our modern era.
Completely. So welcome to the Deep Dive. I'm your host, and today we are immersing ourselves in the analysis from a truly fascinating book. It's called An Uncertain Glory: India and Its Contradictions, and it's by the economists Jean Drèze and Amartya Sen.
Glad to be here to break this down with you.
So glad to have you. Our mission today is to explore a massive question. How can a nation experience world-leading economic growth without it? We are talking gross domestic product expanding by like 6 to 9% annually, while simultaneously failing to improve the basic everyday living conditions for hundreds of millions of its own citizens.
Right, which is a massive disconnect.
We're going to unpack the critical difference between economic growth and human development. But just a quick note before we jump in. Since some of this touches on government policy, I want to make it super clear to you listening that we are absolutely not endorsing any specific political viewpoints here, left-wing or right-wing.
Right, exactly. We're just impartially reporting on the ideas and the data that the authors present in the source material.
Exactly. So if you're approaching this from a standard, Western economic perspective, you might just assume that economic growth and human development are basically synonymous.
Which is, it's a very common assumption. But they are entirely different mechanisms. Economic growth is simply the generation of wealth. It's the sheer expansion of the economy on a spreadsheet.
Just numbers going up.
Exactly. Human development, on the other hand, is what a society actually does with that wealth to, extend human freedoms, capabilities, and well-being.
Right.
The difference between a country having a ton of money on paper and the actual people in that country living longer, healthier, more fulfilling lives. You can easily have the former without the latter.
Which brings us right to the summer of 2012. Because if we really want to grasp what happens when a country prioritizes rapid economic expansion without building the foundational infrastructure to support its most vulnerable people, we got to talk about July 2012.
Oh, the Great Blackout.
Exactly. Half of India just went completely dark. 600 million people suddenly lost electricity.
Yeah, and it made global headlines everywhere.
It did. It was framed as this massive embarrassment, a symbol of administrative chaos in this emerging superpower. But when you look closely at the underlying data of that event, the global headlines basically completely missed the real story.
They absolutely did. The real tragedy of the July 2012 blackout wasn't just that 600 million people lost their power.
Right.
The real tragedy, this quiet, everyday catastrophe that no one in the media was really talking about, was that out of those 600 million people, 200 million of them had never had electricity in the first place.
Wait, 200 million?
Yes. For a third of those people, the Great Blackout was literally just a Tuesday.
Wow.
They were completely off the grid, permanently living in the dark in a country that was simultaneously being hailed as like the next major engine of the global economy.
It perfectly captures the paradox. And okay, let's unpack this, because whenever infrastructure failures like this come up in discussions about India, you inevitably hear the exact same refrain from market commentators, right? They say, India just needs to follow China's model. The government needs to get out of the way, deregulate, and privatize the power sector, just like China did.
Which is a complete myth.
Yeah.
It is a profound misunderstanding of how the Chinese model actually functions.
Really? Because you hear that all the time.
Oh, constantly. But China's power sector is not some, free market libertarian utopia. It is heavily state-controlled. Both India and China actually have state-directed power sectors that utilize private enterprise to execute projects.
Okay, so what's the actual difference then?
The real mechanical difference lies in capital investment and systemic accountability. China invests more than twice as much as a percentage of its GDP into its power sector than India does.
Oh, wow. Twice as much.
Yeah. And they manage that state investment with incredibly strict administrative accountability to achieve near universal access. Nearly 99% of China has electricity.
So relying purely on top-line GDP growth to solve poverty is basically like bragging about a sports car that can go 200 miles per hour, but completely ignoring the fact that it doesn't even have passenger seats.
That is a highly accurate analogy.
Right. Like the wealth is there, the engine is revving, but without the seats, without the public infrastructure actively directing that power to the people, nobody gets to go along for the ride.
Exactly. The infrastructure is the seats. And you see that exact same lack of infrastructure when you look at how wages function in this high-growth environment.
How so?
Well, we tend to assume that a rising GDP automatically lifts all boats, right? The wealth just naturally trickles down. But while India's GDP has been soaring, real wages for the working class have largely stagnated.
Because the wealth is basically being captured by capital rather
No.
than labor.
Precisely. To give you a comparative picture on the mechanics of this, during the first decade of this century, real wages in manufacturing in China grew at an astonishing 12% a year.
Wow, 12% a year is huge.
It is. The workers were actively capturing a share of that growth. But in India, manufacturing wages grew at about 2.5%.
Oh, wow. That's practically nothing with inflation.
Exactly. And agricultural wages, which is where a massive portion of the population actually works, they barely moved at all for long stretches. The wealth is being generated at the very top, but it's not trickling down into the pockets of the people doing the heavy lifting.
So if we've established that top-down GDP growth doesn't automatically build public health infrastructure or, raise living standards, we kind of have to look for the inverse, right? We need to find a place that managed to build that foundational infrastructure without having the massive GDP.
Right.
And we find exactly that by looking right across India's border over to Bangladesh.
Bangladesh is a truly remarkable case study in how to build human capabilities on a tight budget. If you go back to the 1970s, right after their War of Liberation and a devastating famine, international observers basically wrote Bangladesh off. They literally called it a basket case.
But today, the data tells a completely different story. India's per capita income is roughly double that of Bangladesh. India is twice as rich. Yet Bangladesh has completely overtaken India in almost every meaningful metric of human development.
It's incredible to see.
I mean, life expectancy in Bangladesh is 69 years compared to 65 in India. Bangladesh has lower infant mortality, significantly higher child immunization rates, and they've been incredibly successful at reducing fertility rates.
It's a striking contrast for sure.
But, I got to push back on the Bangladesh comparison for a second here. Isn't this a bit of an apples to oranges situation? Because Bangladesh is significantly smaller, and demographically it's much more homogenous than India. Isn't it naturally just easier to roll out a nationwide public health initiative in a smaller, uniform country than in a massive, fractured, incredibly diverse subcontinent like India?
I mean, it is a totally fair critique regarding size and administrative complexity. Managing a nation of over 1 billion people is inherently more difficult. But scale alone doesn't explain the divergence in outcomes.
Okay.
To understand how Bangladesh achieved this, we have to look at the underlying social engine driving the change. What's fascinating here is that the secret to Bangladesh's success wasn't just administrative ease. It was a fundamental shift in women's agency.
Okay, let's unpack how that actually works on the ground. Because women's agency, that can sound like a bit of a buzzword. How did that practically translate to better health outcomes?
It translated into direct economic and social mobilization. Bangladesh fundamentally changed the role of women in its society in a way that India, particularly the northern states of India, really has not.
Like in terms of jobs?
Yeah, just look at the formal workforce. Women's workforce participation in Bangladesh sits around 57%. In India, it's just 29%.
Wow. That is a massive gap in basic economic independence.
It's transformative. When women earn an income, their decision-making power within the household increases. And the data shows that money is disproportionately spent on child nutrition and education.
Right, it goes back to the kids.
Exactly. But it goes beyond just formal employment. Bangladesh realized that you cannot improve public health from a top-down bureaucratic office in the capital. You have to change behavior, village by village.
So what did they do?
Working heavily with NGOs, they mobilized tens of thousands of female grassroots health workers.
And because they were women from within those communities, they probably had the access and the trust to actually change domestic habits, right?
Exactly. These female health workers went door to door, navigating patriarchal structures by speaking directly with mothers, and they established new basic social norms.
Like what kind of norms?
Well, they taught mothers how to use oral rehydration therapy for children with diarrhea, which sounds incredibly simple, But diarrhea is a major killer of infants. And this simple knowledge saves millions of lives.
Just knowing how to mix the water, sugar, and salt.
Exactly. They also counseled on family planning, shifting it from this taboo subject to an everyday norm. And crucially, they worked on changing the culture around sanitation.
Yeah, the sanitation numbers are just staggering when you look at the disparity. In India, despite all the wealth, a massive 50% of households practice open defecation. 50%.
Yeah.
But in Bangladesh, despite being half as wealthy, that number is just 8.4%. They didn't wait to become a rich country to build basic latrines or, to change hygiene habits. They used community mobilization, driven by empowered women, to alter the culture from the ground up.
Which proves that social progress isn't just about waiting for the GDP line to go up so you can suddenly afford to buy public health. It requires direct social action.
And if we go back to that pushback about India's immense size and diversity being the main hurdle, we actually don't even have to look at neighboring countries to prove that human development can work in India. We just have to look internally.
Oh, absolutely.
Because if you break India down state by state, you actually find a perfect blueprint hiding right within its own borders.
You do. India is a vast federated country, and if you treat its different states almost as if they were separate nations, you see wildly divergent policies and outcomes. You basically get what economists call a tale of two Indias.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's look at the success stories first. You have states like Kerala, Himachal Pradesh, and particularly Tamil Nadu. Tamil Nadu wasn't always an economic powerhouse, right?
Okay.
In the 1970s and 80s, it was extremely poor, with like half of its population living below the poverty line.
True. But Tamil Nadu made a critical structural decision. Driven by fierce democratic pressure from disadvantaged groups, particularly lower castes, who were organizing politically to demand their rights, the state government didn't wait for wealth to accumulate.
They just acted.
Yes. They started implementing universal public services immediately. They rolled out universal midday meals in primary schools, they built rural health centers, paved roads, established public transport, and ensured reliable water supply and electricity connections to villages.
And this is where the policy choices become really clear. Because today, you hear so much in development economics about modern sort of hacks.
Right, like conditional cash transfers.
Exactly. Where a government just gives poor people a voucher or direct cash so they can go buy healthcare or education in the private market. But Tamil Nadu didn't do that. They didn't just hand out cash and hope the private sector would magically build schools. They took the hard traditional route of actually building the physical public schools and managing the clinics themselves.
They built functioning government institutions.
Yeah.
And they managed them with relative efficiency. The universal midday meal is actually a perfect example of how interconnected these policies are. Well, providing a free hot meal at school doesn't just improve child nutrition. It creates a massive financial incentive for poor parents to actually send their children to school, which boosts literacy.
Oh, right. Because it saves the family money on food.
Exactly. And on top of that, it frees up the mother's time, allowing her to enter the workforce. So it creates this compounding cycle of development. And today, Tamil Nadu has a high per capita income and very low poverty. They prove that robust, universal public services actually work.
Now, contrast that successful blueprint with the northern heartland states, places like Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, and Madhya Pradesh.
Yeah, in those states, the approach to human capability and public infrastructure has historically been pretty abysmal. The political focus has often been on patronage and caste-based vote banking, rather than delivering universal services.
Right. And when you actually look at the multidimensional poverty metrics in those northern states, which, measures health, education, and living standards, not just daily income, the numbers are just shocking. The multidimensional poverty in those northern Indian states is basically on par with the 27 poorest countries in Africa combined.
That is the stark reality of the two Indias. You have southern regions operating with the social and health indicators of a middle-income country, and northern regions operating with the social indicators of the most deprived places on Earth, all under the exact same national flag.
Okay, so this brings us to a glaring contradiction in the nation's political economy. If states like Tamil Nadu have proven definitively that universal public services work, and if the Indian national economy as a whole is generating massive wealth with a 6 to 9% growth rate, why is the central government failing to fund these basic services nationwide? Where is all the capital actually going?
The short answer is that the capital is being drained by those who already have power.
Wait, really?
Yeah. It is being captured by the affluent middle class and corporate lobbies who utilize their political leverage to extract massive, regressive subsidies from the state.
So a regressive subsidy is basically a reverse Robin Hood scenario, right?
Pretty much.
The government is spending public funds to subsidize things like petrol or electricity, which really only benefits the wealthier folks who can afford to own cars or run air conditioners, while completely ignoring the people who can't even afford a bus ticket or, as we talked about earlier, don't even have a power line to their village.
Exactly. A subsidy is theoretically supposed to help the poor afford basic essentials. But in practice, a regressive subsidy disproportionately channels public money to people who are already well off. Let's look at the mechanics of the fertilizer subsidy, for instance.
Okay.
It was initially introduced during the Green Revolution to boost crop yields. But today, it has evolved into a massive financial entitlement that mostly benefits large, wealthy landowners and corporate fertilizer manufacturers. That fertilizer subsidy alone costs the government roughly 0.8% of the country's entire GDP.
Wow. 0.8% of the GDP just on fertilizer. How does that compare to what the state spends on actual human beings?
Well, the total public expenditure on health for the entire country is a miserable 1.2% of GDP.
Are you kidding?
Nope. So they are spending almost as much subsidizing fertilizer for wealthy farmers and corporations as they are on the healthcare infrastructure for over 1 billion people.
That is wild.
And when you look at the tax code, it gets even more blatant. The government routinely loses over 57,000 crore rupees, which translates to billions of dollars in custom duties that are intentionally foregone strictly on diamonds and gold.
Wow. It is a glaring misallocation of funds, foregoing billions in custom duties on luxury items like diamonds and gold, while underfunding public sanitation and primary education. I mean, it shows exactly who holds the political leverage.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it reveals the fundamental political malfunction at the heart of the paradox. The affluent and middle classes in India have immense political and media clout. They essentially control the narrative. If the government tries to raise the subsidized price of petrol or cut a corporate tax break or tax gold, there is this vocal, highly televised uproar. Politicians back down because that demographic votes and funds campaigns.
While the poorest don't have that megaphone.
Exactly. The most marginalized, the hundreds of millions without electricity or functioning basic schools, lack that organized political voice. So, the state revenue generated by the economic boom is spent placating loud, powerful interest groups instead of building schools or hospitals for the silent majority.
It's a systemic cycle of patronage and extraction. And when everyday citizens actually see this happening on the ground, when they experience the entrenched corruption, the bribes required to get a simple document processed, the resources constantly flowing upward, the natural visceral reaction is to demand swift, harsh punishment. People want summary justice. You constantly hear demands for a draconian ombudsman with supreme powers to just sweep in and lock up all the corrupt officials.
Which is a completely understandable public reaction. When the system is broken, people want retribution. But summary justice does not work to reform a state. You cannot fix a bureaucratic system that fundamentally incentivizes bad behavior just by locking individuals up.
Right.
Retribution might feel satisfying in the short term, but it doesn't change the underlying mechanics of why the corruption happens in the first place.
Because if the system is designed to allow a bureaucrat to hoard power, punishing one guy just opens up the seat for the next guy to do the exact same thing.
Exactly. Corruption thrives where there is a monopoly on power, combined with absolute secrecy. If an official has the unchecked power to delay a service unless they are paid, simply punishing them leaves the exact same structure intact for their successor.
So how do you actually fix it?
To actually reform the rot, you have to change the systems to enforce transparency, tackle the social lenience toward corruption, and alter the incentives. And India has actually engineered a massive systemic success in this arena with the Right to Information Act, passed in 2005.
Oh, let's break down how the RTI actually functions mechanically, because it completely shifts the risk calculus for a corrupt official.
It really does. Before the RPI, if a citizen asked why a road wasn't built or where the funds went, a bureaucrat could literally just ignore them or hide the file in a drawer.
And nothing would happen.
Right. But the RTI Act legally empowered any citizen to request almost any government document, and crucially, it forced bureaucrats to provide that document within 30 days.
Or else what?
Well, if the bureaucrat fails to comply, They face mandatory personal financial fines deducted directly from their own salary.
Oh, that is brilliant. It strips away the secrecy that protects corrupt deals and puts the fear of personal financial ruin right into the bureaucrat. It gives the citizen actual leverage.
Yes.
And speaking of shifting leverage, there is a truly radical proposal by the economist Kaushik Basu regarding bribery that completely flips the traditional legal framework. He proposes that we should legally protect the person giving the bribe.
Yes, specifically in cases of what Bosu defines as harassment bribes. This distinction is critical.
What's the difference?
A harassment bribe is not when you pay to cut the line or get an illegal favor. A harassment bribe is a bribe you are extorted into paying just to get a service you are already legally entitled to, like getting your passport issued or receiving your rightful ration card.
So you're not paying to cheat the system, you're just paying the toll to get what is legally yours.
Exactly. Basu argues that under current anti-corruption law, both the bribe giver and the bribe taker are guilty of a crime.
Right.
Therefore, once the cash changes hands, both parties have a shared vested interest in keeping the transaction a secret, because both could go to jail if it comes to light. The law effectively unites the victim and the extortionist. So Basu proposes exempting the giver of a harassment bribe from all legal punishment.
Oh, I see. By protecting the victim, you empower them to hand over the cash, get their legal document, and then walk straight out of the office and report the corrupt official without any fear of going to jail themselves.
Precisely. It completely destroys the bribe taker's sense of immunity. The bureaucrat would never know if the citizen handing them the cash is going to immediately turn them in. The trust between the corrupt parties is broken, which acts as a massive deterrent.
That is so smart. So what does this all mean? We have mechanisms like the RTI Act and new legal frameworks that can alter incentives. But what does this all mean for the broader culture? Because changing a law is one thing. But changing a society where paying a bribe is just widely accepted as the normal cost of doing business. How do you actually shift a culture where corruption is the established norm?
This raises an important question, and it takes sustained effort. But the mechanism for change is rooted in local accountability. If we look back to Adam Smith, the father of modern economics, and his philosophical work, The Theory of Moral Sentiments, Smith noted that people generally act according to the established rules of behavior.
Meaning we just copy what everyone else is doing.
We look around, we observe what our peers are doing, and we adapt to survive. If everyone in your town is paying a bribe to get water, it feels foolish and self-defeating not to do the same.
Right, you just adapt to the broken rules.
Exactly. But you shift those established rules by decentralizing power and placing it directly into the hands of the community. In India, this is done through empowering local village councils, known as gram panchayats.
Okay, what are those exactly?
A gram panchayat is a localized, self-governing council made up of people from that specific village. When you combine the transparency tools of the RTI Act with the local authority of a gram panchayat, you create direct democratic accountability.
Ah, because you aren't appealing to some faceless bureaucrat in a distant capital. You are literally holding your own neighbors accountable for the village funds.
Precisely. When citizens use these tools to successfully audit a local project and hold their local officials accountable, the social norms begin to shift. People realize they actually have leverage.
They realize they don't have to pay the bribe.
Exactly. And slowly, a vicious cycle of apathy and corruption can be turned into a virtuous cycle of civic engagement. Once transparency and accountability become the new, established rule of behavior, the broader culture follows suit.
Man, this has been such a profound exploration of how societies actually develop. We started by looking at an economic engine that was revving at maximum capacity, generating incredible wealth. But what we've unpacked today is that economic growth is just an engine.
Right.
It is incredibly powerful, absolutely. But without a steering wheel in the form of human development, universal public services, women's agency, and robust infrastructure, that engine is going to leave the vast majority of the population stranded in the dark. While a privileged few speed off, millions remain completely unconnected to the grid.
Yeah, wealth generation is ultimately a means to an end. It is not the end in itself. If that wealth is not actively directed toward expanding human capabilities and freedoms, then the growth of the nation is largely an illusion for the people actually living in it.
Which leaves you, our listener, with a final thought to mull over. This deep dive explored how a nation's massive resources can be disproportionately captured by the most vocal, affluent, and politically organized groups, while the vulnerable are basically ignored. But this dynamic isn't just a macroeconomic phenomenon happening on the other side of the world.
Definitely not.
Look at your own community. Look at the dynamics in your workplace or the budget of your local city council. How often do the loudest, most privileged voices manage to secure the resources, the promotions, and the subsidies, while the silent majority remains entirely unconnected to the grid?
It's a dynamic of power and extraction that exists in almost every human institution if you just know how to look for it.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. Keep questioning the systems and the information around you, and we'll see you next time.